Alright, what is up everybody? I wanted to do something a little different for my normal build videos. I know a lot of content creators do something like a tier list for Warframe, so I just wanted to kind of put together my thoughts on what I consider to be very good frames versus frames that maybe need a little bit of help. When I say good, I often think of a frame that's good as a frame that is versatile. Warframe has so many different activities that you can do that to me a really good frame is a frame that you can not, the ideal frame for me would be you don't have to replace their abilities with Helminth, and you can basically take them to anything and feel good, right? So what I did was I came up with these archetypes of missions. And so I figured, if a frame is good at one of these, they're probably good at all of them. That's not a hard and fast rule. I did kind of have to group some things together weirdly, whatever. I wanted to have some kind of metric, not just like an arbitrary ranking. Because there's some frames that I'll probably rank very high that I don't actually like very much. And some frames that I do like a lot will probably be ranked kind of low. So wanted to have some type of quantitative way of ranking how good a frame is, and then I do have a somewhat arbitrary scale of number of activities they're good at, and then frames that are just really really great at a lot of things. So let's get started with Ash. So Ash is a frame that I really like. I think Ash is really cool looking. That's the other aspect of this, is like aesthetics are such a big part of Warframe that honestly, like, sometimes you don't give a shit if a frame is actually good because you just like them, right? Like, I'm kind of like that with Valkyrie. Most people say Valkyrie is dog shit. I would probably agree, but she's still like my second or third most played frame just because I really like how she looks and I really like her abilities even though they're not that good. So the number one rule in Warframe is do whatever the heck you want. So these are just my thoughts and what I think, and take that with a grain of salt. So I think Ash has a few, his blade storm's a little clunky, but he does have some strengths. He does have very easy armor strip with his 1. He has very good single target damage with his 3, as long as the target can have a finisher attack made on them, which unfortunately is a lot of targets you would want to use this on. You can't, so that kind of stinks. And his blade storm just does massive slash damage, and he's just the best frame to use with slash in general because of his passive. So I would say Ash, I actually wouldn't even count him as a spy frame, honestly. His stealth really sucks. I would say his stealth is almost the worst part of his kit. It's probably not the worst, but it's not like his thing. I think he's more of a high damage frame that happens to have stealth. So he obviously is a really good solo frame to do Rathum with. So that's the arena on Sedna. Is he the fastest? No, but I think that he can do it. He is one of the best endurance frames for stuff like disruption and survival. I kind of threw interception in here, but not a whole lot of people actually do interception endurance anymore, but that's really the only place it fit in. It's got a little bit of an outlier. He's also very good against armored bosses because he can strip armor so fast. That's not such a good... that's not as important when things like Shattering Impact exist. You can also give that ability to other frames with Helminth. But I think that it's one of his strengths. He's really bad against anything where you need to keep something alive. He's not a great open world frame. So I'd say overall he's really good at endurance, one of these arena missions, and armored bosses. I don't think he's very good at just like normal missions. So I'd put him at 3. So he's pretty good at 3 things. I'd say he's maybe one of the best endurance frames. Atlas, I think Atlas is actually pretty decent at these. I made an Atlas video a while ago, probably almost a year ago. I'm a big advocate of very high range Atlas. I think people really underestimate the range that you can get on Atlas's landslide, and it makes him really efficient at clearing stuff like exterminate missions and whatever. And you got to realize I'm trying to think of all levels of play here, right? Like the average player in Warframe is only like MR10 or something, right? They're not doing like, level cap, steel path disruption missions. That is not the average player. Now, I will also think about stuff like steel path, arbitrations. But you have to remember that those are modifiers on these mission types, right? So I do think Atlas is pretty good against in like normal missions. He's like kind of okay at defense. He might get like a plus a half because he can technically be a loot frame, but it's not. He really isn't. He's actually pretty decent and like endurance missions, especially survival. I've taken Atlas pretty far in Steel Path survival, and he performed pretty well. He's like average in ESO, so I would say he's like 2 missions he really excels at. Banshee can be pretty good for bosses in general. If sonar works on a boss, she's really good for it. So I'd probably put her, on these 2 at least. Some things her damage increase doesn't really work, so that's unfortunate. She can also armor strip pretty reliably, so that's pretty nice too. She's okay at defense. I don't think that's really her strong suit though. Let's see. And then I would say she's actually pretty good in endurance because yes, she's like kind of squishy, but shield gating kind of solved that problem for her. So I'd say she's good against bosses and endurance. And I'm going to give her a +1 for focus farming because silence is really good in Adaro. Even if you don't use it, even if you don't use Banshee for it, she's one of my favorite frames to do that with. So I'd actually probably give her like 4 things she's good at. Baruch is a super powerful frame. I think he's insanely fun to play. And this is one of those cases where I love this frame, but I'm probably going to put him really low on this because I don't actually think Baruch is all that versatile. He's not really good at index. And one thing about index is you can kind of cheese index pretty hard with Vazarin and like certain weapons. So the frame that you take to index is not really all that important. So I almost feel bad like putting it on here. So I think he's top tier for endurance stuff. He just destroys enemies with his 4. I would maybe give him like a +0.5 for Adaro because he has a sleep ability, but it's not very good. He's actually pretty good at defense because he can share his daggers with the defense target and he has some CC. So I would probably give him overall a 2. He's not that great in normal missions because even if you're playing solo, if you're just doing a relic or something, you don't want to take Baruch. You're never going to use his 4. So I'd probably put him in the 2 category. Oh boy, Chroma. Oh, Chroma. Let's just call a spade a spade. The only thing that Chroma was marginally useful for was bosses like Prophet Taker and Eidolons, and he's just been eclipsed even for those. I would almost put Chroma. You know what? I'm gonna do this. I am going to make a 0 just for Chroma. I actually think Chroma is one of the worst frames in the whole game. Can he do this stuff? Yeah, he can do that stuff. But he is just this is really that's a little too mean. That's a little too mean. Too mean to people who like Chroma. He can still do it, but I don't think he's really very good at anything else. Ember, really great at just normal missions. Kind of meh against bosses. Her buff just gives heat, which is okay. Unless you give her a Helminth ability, she's not super great at any kind of defense mission or anything. She's actually pretty good at infested salvage, which unfortunately there's really no reason to do that because you can just get Nidus Prime now. So unless you really need stuff for Bile that badly, she's actually pretty good for vaults, I would say. Which now that I'm realizing that I put vaults on here, Baruch might go up one. So I would actually put, maybe Baruch and Atlas up one, because their vaults you can kind of take a lot of damage sometimes, and they're both pretty darn tanky. So I'd actually say that they're both pretty good at those. So she's pretty good at vaults. She's pretty good at normal missions. I think she's pretty good at endurance missions. I've taken Ember pretty far in Steel Path, and you can get a lot of mileage out of her. So I'd put her in the 3. Equinox. Equinox is a weird case for me because theoretically she just has so much potential, but I just really have a heck of a time making Equinox actually work. I know she's pretty popular, so I'd say she's great at normal missions. Doesn't really have anything against bosses. She is unreliable in defense missions, I would say. I don't think she's very good, personally. Yes, you have sleep, but that's pretty much all you have. I think she's pretty good for open world because she can guarantee perfect captures. She has some cheese for the index with her duality, so I'd give her 3. And then it's hard to say she's not good in endurance. I'm actually going to give her a +1 for defense because she has just such strong scaling AoE that, and that's where she would really shine, is in this type of mission. So probably 1, 2, 3, and then 4. I mean, she's one of the most traditional ESO frames. Honestly, she might even non-defense. I think she's a pretty versatile frame. She can do a lot. I mean, really, it comes down to sleep and maim. That's the 2 things, right? All right, Excalibur. Oh, what is Excalibur good at? Pretty much just normal missions. I don't think many people. I've really never seen people use Excalibur for. He's not known for being an endurance frame, so I'd put him in the 1 camp, honestly. I mean, you could maybe. I mean, his chromatic blade does kind of take him to the next level, and if you're really good at keeping stuff CC'd with his 2, then you can probably do endurance missions with him. But he can't really do anything for bosses or stuff like that. So I'm being pretty generous giving him a 2. And that's mostly just because he was my starter frame, honestly. So I'm playing a little favorite here, but he could maybe go down to just 1 thing that he's good at. Frost, defense missions. Okay. Gara. Okay, so I would say Gara's pretty good at normal missions because you can just build her for raw AoE and just, she just has massive AoE burst damage for lower level stuff. Really great at defense missions. Really great for just endurance in general because she has so much damage reduction and scaling. So I'd put her at the 3. I think she is pretty good at those things. Garuda is an interesting case. Garuda's another character that I really want to like. I don't think she's, she is all about scaling, right? So I think her main thing is really endurance. I don't think she's, just to be clear, every frame can do these standard missions. I'm more talking about I need to go run a rescue mission for, what frame would you actually want to take to that? Stuff like that. The Kuvazar exists, so any frame can do these, right? So Garuda is probably okay at normal missions because she at least has her one that she can jump to stuff, and then she has scaling damage for endurance missions. So I'd probably put her with like Excalibur. Overall, Garuda has tons of potential, but is kind of a little lackluster or clunky, I guess. I don't know. She's just one of those frames that in theory she's so good, but in practice she's not as good, I don't think. Gauss the Baus. So probably one of the best frames for just running stuff like this. He can be pretty good against some bosses because of his attack speed buff. So that is like a buff. It's not necessarily a damage buff though. Not super duper awesome at like defense type things. Very fast though, and I'd say he's awesome at defense or endurance missions. So I'd probably put him at like a 3. I think that he is, he's pretty solid. He's one of those frames that's super good at the things he's good at and just kind of average at everything else. Grendel, my boy Grendel. I love Grendel. So I'd say Grendel is actually okay for defense. I've played Grendel for a decent amount of defense stuff on Steel Path, and as long as you can keep sucking, he'll defend stuff. Bosses, he's like meh. He's okay at normal missions. I mean, you can play like a pulverized build. I think his bread and butter is endurance stuff though. Like just living or just that scaling damage is so satisfying. So I would probably give him like a 2. Because I mean, yeah, you can run. You know what? I'll probably give him a 3. I mean, with catapult pulverized builds, you can actually like kind of go through these types of missions pretty quickly. I'm probably being biased here though. I should probably just leave him at a 2. Harrow. I think Harrow is an awesome frame, like super interesting kit. Really great endurance frame because he has just so much like shield gating reset, buffs, infinite energy. Like Harrow is like amazing, right? Super amazing. I think he's, not anything special for open world stuff. He's okay on defense missions. He kind of has a special place for Eidolons. And he can be pretty good against bosses because of his buff, his crit buff for his team. So if you're thinking about from like a solo perspective, I'd say he's mostly just good for endurance type stuff. But if you're talking about more team-oriented activities, I think he rises in value. So I'd probably give him like, I don't want to give him all of these bosses because I think that's a little disingenuous, but because he's so good at bosses, I'd probably put him at 3. And then he's also great at endurance stuff. Hildren is a pretty versatile frame depending on what you build for. I actually think she's great for like really easy, kind of lower level missions like this. She's really great at that because you can just run like a blazing pillage build and just like run through missions and everything dies. It's like old World on Fire Ember. So I think she's great at that. She's like average at bosses because her one is kind of like meh. And actually, I won't say that. She's actually pretty good against liches. I've had pretty good luck with Hildren against liches. She's kind of one of my go-tos because she's like so tanky. So, which now that I think about it, yeah. So she's pretty good there. And then let's see. And then I think she's pretty solid for endurance because you pretty much can't die, and you have armor strip and like pretty good like kind of AoE damage with blazing pillage. She's pretty good at defense as well if you go like a 4 build. So I'd probably say she's like a 1, 2, 3, like maybe a 4 type thing. So Hydroid. I'm trying to decide if I should say what I think of Hydroid or what most people think of Hydroid. So I've made a few Hydroid videos, and I really don't think Hydroid's all that bad. I usually play like a build based around his 2, and it's honestly not even remotely as bad as people say it is. That being said, I will probably put him in the 1 tier because I think the way that most people play him is like just for whatchamacallit, just for loot. So I think he gets a 1 tick for that. I like him a lot, but I'm going to have to forego my bias and put him here. Inaros. Inaros is kind of a weird frame because, you know, he just has the health thing going on. So there are some things that endurance is that Inaros is actually pretty good for. Like, I like him for liches and stuff because he can't die. So, you know, and you just take the Cedo and you bring Inaros, and it's a very easy experience. So I would say he's actually pretty nice for that. He's very good at Exploiter because, once again, he can't die. That boss fight is you just have to live. Now, that's not really a thing that people like do that often, so he's also like the hijack frame. I really love him for open world stuff because, you know, yeah, there's stealth, but there's also just not giving a shit if people are hitting you. So, and he's not really very good at endurance. So, I'd say he's like maybe a 3. So, you know, 1, 2, 3. I don't really want to give him any more than that. Ivara. Okay. Focus farming? Check. One of the best endurance frames? Check. One of the best open world frames? Check. Can do spy missions? Check. Can do defense stuff? Check. Can do open world bosses? Can do... Yeah, okay, so Ivara's going to go in the infinity category because she's really good at a lot of stuff. Ivara's kit is just... sometimes I wonder why more people don't talk about Ivara. Like, you see people saying, like, Korra's busted. Ivara's kit is just nuts. And she is, like, just like her base kit is so good. And then you add in stuff, like, I haven't talked about Helminth really at all, but then you can add in stuff like Ensnare on Ivara is just ridiculous. Like, her kit is amazing. If you're a new player, get Ivara. Like, do yourself a favor. She is amazing. And there's also other stuff, like, you know, that she makes super easy. Korra. Really good against doing just normal missions. Whipclaw is great for just running through and killing stuff. Really great at defense. I'd say she is almost a necessary Rathum frame. She's great for focus farming. She's great for endurance. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. So Korra is definitely way up there. I'm realizing this Infinity class is like kind of unnecessary. Well, maybe. Lavos. So I think Lavos is pretty good for just like going through and doing normal missions. Like, he has pretty nice mobility with his 2. His 4 does like really great damage in a huge area. He's not like nothing special against bosses. He's okay for defense stuff. Not really that amazing. I think he's like a pretty decent endurance frame, but kind of just like normal missions he does pretty well at. Unfortunately, he doesn't really like do amazing at other stuff. I think he's like passable for ESO, so I might give him like a 3 just because you can make a nuke build with him and it will work. Limbo. So Limbo is in my frame of choice for doing stuff like a sortie rescue mission. That's awesome. Great defense frame. He's actually pretty good at stuff like spy. And he actually has some pretty crazy like weapon damage builds for stuff like Steel Path Survival. So I'd actually probably give Limbo like a 4. I think he's pretty good at a bunch of stuff. Loki, pretty good spy frame. I'd give him like a tick for open world just for Plaguestar, because man, that event is brutal without a Loki or a Nova. Like holy shit, that takes so long, and it's that important of an event that I will give that to him. Endurance, he's a stealth frame. You know, he can do that. Let's see. I personally, I play Loki a decent amount. I know he's not very popular. He's like a very high range, irradiated disarm Loki is pretty good at defense missions. I played him a lot on Steel Path defense missions, and I think he's pretty decent. So, I would say he's probably like a 3. I don't think Loki's nearly as bad as people give him credit for, honestly. Mag, my girl. So, great at normal missions. You can kill stuff. Like, almost all your abilities will just kill enemies in these kind of missions. She's great at defense. She has so much CC. I think she is really good at endurance missions, and I actually love Mag for ESO. So I would give Mag a 4. I think she's super awesome. Mesa. Mesa is great at normal missions, obviously. Great at certain bosses, so she's kind of like certain things she's really good at. I really like her for bounties and stuff. Like peacemakers are just amazing for that. She's actually pretty good at the index, and if you build her more for like her CC than her peacemakers, she's actually very good at endurance too. So I'd probably give her a 4 as well. She's a pretty solid frame. Mirage. Oh man, Mirage is a damn good frame. So she is one of the best boss frames. Unfortunately, Eclipse can be used by other frames, but you know she's still one of like the OG like high damage frames, and she does have the combination of her clones and Eclipse to do tons of damage. She's not really like a defense frame, not very good at open world stuff. I would say she's really good at anything you need a lot of damage, so like endurance, bosses, amazing in ESO with her mine build. So I'd say like between bosses, I think she's pretty much good at like every kind of boss. Except actually she's not very good at liches, honestly. So probably like bosses, endurance, and focus farming. So I'd probably give her like a 4 kind of deal. Necros. Necros is pretty darn good. He has some like unique cases, like he's great for arena farming. I think he's pretty solid in endurance, like he's really tanky. Let's see. I think he gets like a tick for specialty just because he's a loot frame. And then, yeah, so that's probably, I'd say he's like a 3. He's like a comfortable 3. You know? Neja is great for just normal missions because he's a speedy boy. He's great. Doesn't really do anything against bosses. Really nice for a lot of defense missions because of his 3 augment. I'd say he's pretty solid for open world stuff just because he's really tanky, and you know pretty fast. Great endurance frame because like everything in his kit just scales so well. So I'd probably give him like probably like a 4. I'd say he's like a 4. Neja's a really solid frame. Nidus. Nidus is another frame that I want to give Nidus like a really high rating, but he's not good at a lot of stuff. I'd say, you know, he's not really good at just normal missions. He's not very good against bosses. He is actually pretty good against defense. He's a classic hijack sortie frame, which like those missions are super annoying. Like you need a frame that can do that stuff, right? He's, you know, one of the classic Rathum frames, although unfortunately you can take larva and put it on other stuff, so that's not as good. Great endurance frame, and I actually think he's pretty good for ESO because you can slurp up stuff together with larva and actually do pretty good work. So unfortunately I kind of have to like scale this by larva being subsumable. So I'd probably give Nidus like a 4. Like, I mean, I want to give Nidus like infinity because he's so awesome. Nova. Nova is, I kind of want to put Nova in like the infinity category because she's very versatile. Like whenever there's a few frames that whenever something happens, like an event or something, there's a few frames that will often like break it. And like frames like Limbo, Nova, I think Molecular Prime just changes the game. So I think she can be awesome at defense. She can do some specialty stuff such as like the Plague Star event or whatever, like with her portals. I think she's awesome at open world because you can just zip around with her like a really high range portal build. I personally think she's pretty solid for endurance missions, especially if you do like some kind of endurance or like empower hybrid build or something, like where you can swap between Speedva and Slova or whatever. So I'd probably give her at least a 4. She's a really great frame. So Nyx, I would say not very good at normal missions, very good against specific bosses that you can use her to. Really solid defense frame with her 3. I'd say I personally think she's a really good endurance frame because she has such good armor strip and CC, and a lot of times you don't even need to run her 4 augment anymore. So I would personally say she's probably like, between bosses, defense, endurance stuff, I'd probably say she's like a 4. I think Nyx is pretty solid. Oberon, I'm going to put Oberon at 1 because he has Phoenix Renewal. So he's useful for arbitrations. Otherwise, he's just not really super used. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna give Oberon some credit. He's a nice frame for soloing Eidolon still. He's the frame that I use to solo Eidolons, like just for fun. I mean, it's not like a super meta thing to do, but I gotta give the Goat Man a little credit. Octavia. Oh, Octavia. Not the best at normal missions, not really the best at bosses, but man, anything where you have to defend stuff, I think she's awesome for bounties because you can just go invisible and your ball kills everything. One of the best endurance frames. So I want to give her like a billion. Actually, hold on. She has Amp. I totally forgot about Amp. She can do bosses too. Yeah, so she's like a 5. Octavia is like maybe she's like really close, like because some like certain archetypes of bosses she doesn't really do that well at. I would almost put her, I think I might, because she has like just her ball by itself, like stuff like Plague Star and stuff like that, she's just super good at, and the scaling potential of her kit makes her like potentially good at almost anything. Her kit just has everything. Her kit is just so complete. Protea is a beast. I love Protea. I think Protea, the only thing on this list that Protea is not good at is like bosses. I think she's like really good at almost anything else. Like, she's actually pretty solid in ESO. I've used her to solo, many rounds of ESO. I think she's pretty solid. Amazing endurance frame. Awesome in open world. Those turrets have a gigantic range. She's actually really convenient to use for like just that kind of casual stuff. I would probably put her in like the 5 group. I think she is like very versatile, really fun to play. All right, my boy Revenant. I actually love playing like a 4 build Revenant in just like normal missions. He's really good at certain bosses. So if you can use his combo on a boss, he's amazing. Not as good at defense, not as good at like specialty stuff. He's like very, kind of special frame for the index. His kit scales amazingly well. So I'd say he's probably like a 1, 2, 3, like probably like a 4. You know, a lot of potential though, a lot of potential. Rhino. All right, Rhino should probably just be like a 6. You know, like Rhino is pretty darn good. He's just like he just has a lot in his kit. Right, one of the best frames for ESO, not for damage, but for buffing damage. Great endurance frame because roar, iron skin. His kit just has tons of scaling. He's actually pretty good in index as like one of the, if you're in like a group, if he's playing like the DPS and people use him for iron skin. Let's see, defense you can build as 4 bosses. He has roar. I would comfortably put Rhino in this group. I think he's a solid frame. Saren, okay, I'm just gonna say it. I think Saren is the best frame in the game. I'm gonna put her in the Infinity category. You can build her so many ways. She can do health tanking. She can do shield gating. She can do massive AoE scaling damage. If you just go like a Spore build, you can build her more for her 4, or add some Helmet shenanigans to make her more of a nuker. You can forego her AoE damage entirely and focus on her buffs. She has like some of the highest damage potential in the game. I actually think that. Sorry, I've been talking for way too long. Water break. Alright, I'm back. So I actually legitimately think Saren is the best frame in the whole game. I think she is either good or can be good at pretty much anything. Yeah, so Sevagoth, pretty good endurance with his passive, and I mean Gloom is super good. I mean, he doesn't really do anything special against bosses and stuff. Ever since they removed his Shadow Forms 1 working on bosses, which was kind of like the best part about him, he's kind of like meh. I think like Gloom is a really good ability, but I think Gloom is almost like he kind of gets carried by the fact that Gloom is on his helmet ability. You know, like if his helmet ability was like his 1 or something, I feel like he'd be not very good at all to get. So, you know, I think he can do endurance stuff. He's okay at that. I'll like maybe, you know, he does have Gloom, so he can do defense missions, I think he's like maybe a 2. I don't actually think Sevagoth is that good though. Titania, awesome at bosses, very good at like normal missions. I'd almost put her in like the specialty category for certain things because she's just like so good at particular things. I think she's great at endurance. Like I have a Titania video. I think she can scale really well. Like she has a slash-based exalted weapon. So I'd say she's probably like a 4. You know, considering how good she is at like normal missions, bosses. I'd say she's comfortably at like a 4. Trinity has she's a little weird. She's kind of like Hydroid, where if I did this by how I play Trinity, I'd probably put her much higher, but I'm gonna go with like the more normal perception of Trinity, because I usually play her with like, you know, abating link builds or, you know, March for Death shenanigans or stuff like that. So I actually think she's pretty good against bosses, because abating link can be really strong. I think she's pretty weak for like normal missions and defense stuff. I'd say, so yeah, bosses she's really good. You know, focus farming, she's like a pretty classic frame, so I'll probably give her like 3. I think she's like top, you know, not top tier, but really good for like 3 different things. Valkyr, okay, if I had to go with like, I mean, I'm gonna go with like what most people think on this, because, you know, I don't want to play favorites too much. I mean, I think most people would say she's one of the weakest frames. I personally use her for like everything, and I just like, you know, kind of Frankenstein her with helmets to make her good at stuff. But I will, you know, I will admit that she could use some help, even though she's one of my favorite frames. So let it be said that I'm not playing favorites. Vauban, I think he has some like kind of niche use cases. Really good at defense. Can be useful in ESO. I'd say he's probably like a 3. Volt is a monster. I think Volt he is pretty darn close to Saren for the best frame, I think. I shit you not. I actually think Volt is in contention for the best frame in the whole game. He has natural shield gating. He's got a speed build for these kind of missions. He's one of the best boss frames. He is pretty decent at defense stuff because of his 3 and his 4 for CC. He's not super good at like bounties and stuff. He's a great endurance frame, I think. As long as when you do him for endurance, you have to build him for either like his his speed buff, and he has amazing shield gating and CC. And then focus farming, he's just a classic. So I think he's in like this category. I think Volt is like a top tier frame. All right, now Wisp. Wisp is another frame. So in my personal opinion, I think the 3 strongest frames in Warframe are Saren, Volt, and Wisp. Because they are so versatile and they're so good at so many things. So I would say that Wisp, you are like basically never sad to see a Wisp. It like doesn't matter what you're doing, she's awesome. And that's basically just for her 1. People are so excited to see a Wisp just for her first ability. Wisp's 1 is better than most frames' entire kits. And then that's completely ignoring the fact that all she has to do is jump to be invisible. That's like a whole extra ability with no energy cost. Her 3 is one of the craziest abilities in the game. Huge AoE, CC, massive damage amp, status application. Her 2 gives her invulnerability frames in mobility. She has like her whole teleport shenanigans. Like she's just crazy at so many things. Like I probably have to put her like I might put her in the infinity category. I don't think there's ever gonna be a thing that Wisp is bad at. I genuinely she just brings too much. Wukong, good for normal missions, kind of meh bosses. You can build him for range and like stagger enemies with his 2, but like he is a really good spy frame. I think he's a pretty good open world frame. He can do like arenas and stuff. He's okay for endurance. So I'd probably put him at like a 5, maybe like a 4. Zaku, amazing endurance frame, insane endurance frame. I'd say he has like a specialty thing where he's like the best frame at breaking open boxes. He's also really good at just like running through missions with his guns on. Let's see. So yeah, I think Zaku's like a 3. He has like crazy scaling, right? Like insane scaling. Zephyr, I'd probably put. So she's really good at anything with defense. I actually think because she's pretty flexible, you can do like a fast build with Jetstream and do normal missions. She's really good at anything with defense stuff. I think she's great in the open world, especially for newer players, and she has crazy scaling for endurance. So I'd say she's like probably like a 4. She's kind of like against bosses. I mean, she has like tankiness, so. And then Yoreli, I think she's okay at normal missions. Now that Marilena changed, I will say that the changes were a really nice change. I think she could use some more buffs. Her passive is really strong, but I'd say she's good at normal missions and is passable for endurance, maybe. So I would maybe put her in the 2. Maybe this might be being kind of generous. So So now, does this match up? So this, I tried to do this purely based off of how many activities a Warframe was good at. Now, something else you could do is like, okay, well, how does this line up with like a tier list for Warframe? You know, other creators' tier lists. I think it actually would be relatively close. There's probably some frames that would move up or down a tier or two, but I think for the most part, like it's probably pretty decent. I think overall, you know, I just Wisp and Saren are just crazy, and Volt is very close to being up here as well. Honestly, Volt is just unique. Like his shield is just so unique. So I'd say like these frames are, you know, obviously super good to get. I'm sure some things on here are going to be controversial, like Banshee or Limbo or whatever, but that's, you know, I tried to be, you know, as unbiased as I could. I mean, some of my favorite frames in the whole game are at the bottom, like Grendel and Valkyr, and frames that I don't really like Rhino, but, you know, I put them at the top. So tried to make this as unbiased as I could. Thought it'd be like a fun little activity. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, am I insane? Is this like way off base? So yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.